The first rays of dawn slipped over the serrated horizon of Mesa Diablo like pale fingers touching stone, stirring the desert into cautious life. Dust motes danced within the golden light as Rowena Sinclair stood at the crest of the bluff above. Her sprawling ranch, the silence broken only by the faint cry of a distant hawk. Her breath came in measured puffs, each inhalation tinged with the tang of sage and the sharp promise of another sweltering day for a woman accustomed to the solitude of cattle drives and the constant labor of tending her herd. This morning felt different. The rancid tang of worry clung more potently to her senses than the scent of sun-baked earth. The past year had weighed on her like a laid saddle, cattle prices plummeting, the well on her eastern pasture running dry, creditors circling like vultures. Every sleepless night had been haunted by the ledger's cruel insistence. Debts owed, margins vanishing, the weight of her father's legacy threatening to crumble. Mesa Diablo had been in the Sinclair family for 3 generations. To lose it would mean burying the last of her bloodline's dreams beneath the dusty wind. Yet Rowena never leaned on fear. Her spine bore the hard curve of resolve, her hands calloused by the unrelenting rhythm of ranch work. She had carved this life with sweat and grit, and she would not allow it to slip away without one final stand. She shifted her gaze westward to the narrow strip of fence that bordered the trading post and auction grounds today, a gauntlet. The rumor was out, a caravan moving through the territory, bringing wretched souls bound and propped for sale. Children, women, men chattel under the yoke of those who trafficked in misery. It sickened Rowena to her core, yet she could not look away. At full gallop, she descended the bluff, her mare's hooves churning the dust, heart pounding with cold purpose. By mid-morning, the trading post sat amid a throng of haggling ranchers, drifters with vacant eyes, and auctioneers trading flesh for coin. The air trembled with the sharp ring of the auctioneer's hammer, the low murmur of bidders, the occasional sniffle of the broken. Rowena tethered her horse and advanced, the wooden platform looming before her like an altar of suffering. Her wide-brimmed hat shadowed her face, but her eyes burned clear and bright true steel. Among the lot stood a girl no older than 12, her wrists chafed raw by iron shackles, her tangled hair a nest of dust and straw. Dust clung to her sunburned cheeks. Her dress was threadbare. One bare foot swayed uncertainly as she watched. The crowd, Rowena's jaw tightened. She had known hardship, loss of livestock, the death of her mother in childbirth, but never this. A girl sold like cattle. Her heart roared in protest, a furious drumbeat that drove her forward. $50 silver, cried a grizzled ranch hand, his voice thick with contempt. Laughter rippled among the bidders. The girl flinched, a small, hollow sound. Rowena swallowed the bile rising in her throat. She drew a rough burlap sack sculpted from last week's earnings, just enough to meet the bid. She set it down on the platform. The room stilled like the breath before a storm. 100, she called, her voice low yet unyielding. Heads turned. Sneers. The auctioneer's gavel wavered. 150, shouted another rancher, spurred by mockery. The girl's eyes flickered to Rowena, a spark of hope or confusion. Rowena couldn't tell. She ignored the jibes, her gaze locked on the auctioneer. 200, she said firmly. A hush fell. The other bidders exchanged glances, measuring her. Locals knew that Rowena Sinclair's ranch was strapped tight, but they also knew her reputation for fierce independence, for honoring her word. Who'll bid 250? The auctioneer's voice dripped with skepticism. 250, Rowena echoed, setting another sack of coins beside the first. Her heart thundered in her ears, but her face betrayed nothing. Silence. The girl watched her with wide, astonished eyes. No one else spoke. At last, the auctioneer nodded, the gavel falling with a decisive crack. Sold to the lady in the hat, 250. A wave of disapproval swept the crowd, thin and cold. Rowena lifted her chin and strode onto the platform. She unlocked the shackles with an iron key procured months ago on a whim, bracing for the inevitable confrontation. Before she could speak, the girl staggered forward, clutching Rowena's sleeve. Her voice, barely above a whisper, trembled in the hush. "Please, my name is Silva. Don't let them find me." Time seemed to halt. Rowena felt each heartbeat as if it were a drum in the silence. The girl's eyes glistened with fear and something else, determination. In that instant, Rowena understood why she had bid, why she would pay any price. This child's spirit called to hers, forging a bond as real as any oath. The murmurs around them faded to dust. Rowena met Silva's gaze and offered the only promise she could make in that hellish arena. "You're safe with me now." A tremor passed through the girl's shoulders, and she nodded. Letting tears slip free, an oppressive hush waited around them. Neighbors who once spat scorn now fell silent, uncertain. Rowena dropped the key back into her leather pocket and helped Silva from the platform. The crowd parted as they moved, the two figures leaving a trail of awed silence. Outside, the desert sun beat down mercilessly, but Rowena did not falter. She led Silva to her mare. The child hesitated before the great beast, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Rowena crouched to look her in the eye. "She won't hurt you," she assured gently, stretching out a hand to Silva's frail one. "Promise me you'll try." Silva swallowed hard, then placed her small fingers atop Rowena's. It was an unlikely alliance, rancher and rescued girl, yet something in Rowena's stern but warm gaze gave Silva courage. Together, they mounted the horse, Rowena guiding. Silva behind her as they cantered away from the auction grounds. Rowena's mind churned with questions. Who was Silva running from? What dark tale lay behind those frightened eyes? But one thought sang above all others. Mesa Diablo had a new soul to protect. The wind whipped their hair, dust swirling in their wake like an omen. Rowena's heart pounded not with dread, but fierce resolve. Whatever history Silva carried, whatever dangers lurked beyond the horizon, Rowena would face them. The ranch lay silent when they returned, corral gate swinging, the distant lowing of cattle like a lullaby for the damned and the weary. Rowena led Silva to the old bunkhouse, brushing dust from the child's tangled braid. In the dim light, Silva's voice carried a secret timbre. "I know who they are, what they want, and I know how we can stop them, but you have to trust me." Rowena looked into Silva's eyes, searching for any sign of deception. Only fear, and something like steel. In that moment, Rowena understood. This child held a power that could change Mesa Diablo's fate. But it would demand everything of them both. And as the sun dipped toward the western sky, painting the world in blood gold, Rowena Sinclair made a silent vow. She would protect this girl, unravel her secret, and stand against the darkness creeping toward her ranch. For if she failed, Mesa Diablo would be lost, and Silva would vanish like a ghost on the wind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Dust rose behind the hooves of Rowena's mare as she cut across the open range, the child clinging to her back like a shadow. They had left the auction behind, but the tension hadn't eased. If anything, it had deepened, coiling tighter in Rowena's gut with every mile. Silva hadn't spoken a word since her whispered warning. She clung with an unnatural stillness that told Rowena the girl had learned silence the hard way. But now that she'd brought her home, if a threadbare ranch clinging to survival could be called a home, Rowena would have to decide what came next. The bunkhouse creaked as she opened the door, the old boards complaining in protest. It had once held 10 ranch hands. Now it stood half empty, kept just livable by Rowena's efforts and the rare, temporary help she could afford. Rowena stepped aside, letting Silva enter first. The girl paused just inside the threshold, eyes scanning the sparse furnishings, the 2 cots, the potbelly stove, the dry sink, the single table and chairs, all with the wary caution of someone who expected everything to vanish. "It's not much," Rowena said, removing her gloves and setting them on the table. "But you'll be safe here." Silva's gaze flicked to her, lingering a second too long before she nodded. Rowena crossed the room and opened the old chest near the stove. "Clothes might be a bit big, but they'll do for now. You can wash up in the trough. I'll bring you a towel and fresh water." She paused, then added, "After that, I'd like to hear your story, but only if you're ready." Silva nodded again, clutching the clothes with a small, grateful murmur. Rowena stepped outside and drew a full bucket from the rain barrel, carried it to the trough, and left it with a bar of lye soap. She didn't look back until she heard the splash of water and the faint gasp that followed the child reacting to the cold. She gave Silva space, walking back toward the main house with her mind still thick with questions. Why had the girl whispered? About being hunted? Who was chasing her, and why did she say she knew how to stop them? In the kitchen, Rowena lit the stove and fetched a tin of beans, a few old biscuits, and a small wedge of hard cheese. It wasn't much, but it was what she had. She stirred the pot as it warmed and glanced out the window. Silva stood by the trough in a clean shift now, her bruises clearer under the morning sun, thin arms, long scars. Her legs bore marks Rowena didn't want to think about. But it was her eyes that haunted Rowena, the wary defiance, the way they searched the horizon like a scout dot. By the time Silva stepped into the kitchen, her hair damp and skin flushed from scrubbing, Rowena had set 2 tin plates and cups on the table. "Eat," Rowena said gently, pulling out a chair. The girl sat stiffly but dug in. Rowena didn't speak until Silva had finished half her food. "Tell me what you meant back at the auction. Who's after you?" Silva's hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork. Her voice was quiet, but her words were deliberate. "They weren't slavers, not really, the men who had me. They were looking for something they think I know." Rowena leaned forward. "What do they think you know? How to get into the vault?" That made Rowena pause. "Vault?" Silva nodded. "Out past Red Valley, in the rocks near the old crossing. It's not a bank vault, older than that. Something buried there." "Treasure?" "No." Silva's gaze was steady. "Something worse." Rowena frowned, unsure whether she was listening to a child's fever dream or something far more dangerous. "Why would they think a child like you knows how to find it?" "Because of my mother." Silva looked down at her plate. "She was one of them, once, not anymore. She ran, took me with her. They caught her, but I got away." Rowena stared. The quiet girl she'd pulled off a slave block might be the key to something dangerous, something powerful men were willing to kill for. "And now they want you," Rowena said. Silva nodded. "They think she told me the way in." "She didn't, but I remember enough of her maps to lead them close." A chill crept up Rowena's spine. She hadn't expected this, but she didn't hesitate. "They won't get you," she said firmly. "You're under my roof now. No one comes through that without bleeding." Silva didn't smile, but her shoulders eased. That was enough for now. The next 3 days were quiet, the ranch subdued under the weight of heat and uncertainty. Silva stayed close to the bunkhouse, helping with small chores, feeding the chickens, sweeping the porch, and mending an old saddle Rowena hadn't touched in months. Rowena didn't ask more questions. She watched, listened. Silva was cautious but not secretive. She spoke plainly. She asked about horses and cattle, about windmill repairs and irrigation channels. She picked up skills faster than Rowena expected, but she never strayed far, never turned her back to open ground. And every night, she bolted the bunkhouse door with precise care. On the 4th morning, smoke rose on the southern horizon. Rowena spotted it while fixing a busted hinge on the barn door. A narrow plume, too controlled to be a wildfire, too far. Off the trail for a settler's cookfire, her gut went cold. She dropped the wrench and strode toward the bluff with her spyglass. The black ribbon of smoke curled up near the flatland east of Cold Basin, maybe 5 miles out. An abandoned farmhouse sat out there. Nothing worth burning, unless someone was sending a message. Rowena didn't hesitate. She went to the bunkhouse. "Silva, saddle up." The girl's eyes flicked to the window, then to Rowena's face. She didn't ask why. She just moved. They rode hard across the range, sun climbing to its zenith by the time they reached the edge of Cold Basin. What had once been a homestead was now scorched earth-burned barns, a collapsed house, and blackened. Fences, cattle carcasses lay bloated and buzzing with flies. Rowena dismounted slowly, rifle in hand. Silva stayed mounted but scanned the horizon. "Raiders?" she asked. "No." Rowena crouched by a piece of scorched leather nailed to a post. It bore a crude carving dot and eye. A circle, and 3 slashes through it. She turned to Silva. "That mean anything to you?" The girl went pale. "They're here." Rowena rose, dusting her palms. "You said they weren't slavers. What are they?" Silva hesitated, then said softly, "They call themselves the Hollow Eye. They want to bring something back." Rowena studied the charred remains of the farm. "Then we'd better make sure they fail." They rode back fast. Before nightfall, Rowena had checked the fences, bolted the doors, set traps around the barn and main house. Her shotgun was loaded, her rifle cleaned. A second revolver rested in her boot. She found Silva on the porch, knees drawn up, watching. "The stars. You don't have to stay," Silva said. "They're after me, not you." Rowena sat beside her. "Mesa Diablo's my home. And now it's yours too. We defend it, together." Silva nodded. For the first time, she leaned against Rowena's shoulder. Not with weakness, with trust. Neither spoke again. But the stars above blinked slow and bright, and the wind carried something new in its song. War was coming. But so was Reckoning. And Rowena Sinclair was ready. The night air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and iron. Crickets chirped in solemn rhythms as moonlight spilled over Mesa Diablo like a flood of silver. Rowena stood watch atop the old hayloft roof, wrapped in her duster, rifle balanced. Across her knees, Silva slept below, curled into the corner of the bunkhouse bed with a knife beneath her pillow. Every instinct Rowena had honed over a lifetime whispered that the quiet wouldn't last. When dawn came, it brought no peace. Only heat and questions. She let Silva sleep in for once. The girl had spent half the night tracing symbols into the dirt beside the bunkhouse, whispering to herself in a language Rowena didn't know but could feel, ancient, forgotten. Rowena watched from the shadows, didn't interrupt. That morning, she checked the far fence line. The cattle were uneasy, gathering near the creek bed. In unnatural clusters, birds circled overhead, carrion crows too early for any kill. Something was shifting in the desert. Back at the ranch, Silva helped prepare lunch, her movements more fluid now, more assured. She seemed calmer, focused, but her eyes still flicked to the horizon too often. As they sat on the porch, sharing a pan of cornbread and coffee, Rowena asked, "What's in that vault you mentioned?" Silva's fork paused midair. "A door. Beneath. The rocks near the old crossing. They say it leads to something ancient, something not meant for daylight. Stories? Worse." Silva's voice grew distant. "The Hollow Eye doesn't just want gold or land. They want to wake something. Something my mother helped seal." Rowena stared, unsure what part of her wanted to believe or what part already did. "And they think you can unseal it?" "Yes." Silva looked down. "Because I saw the map. Not all of it, but enough. Then we destroy it. The vault, the map, whatever they need. We finish it." Silva's eyes widened, then filled with tears. She nodded. That evening, Rowena began preparing for war. First, she rode into town. A risky move, but she needed information and allies. Jericho Flats was a sleepy dust bowl with 2 saloons, 1 church, and more secrets than people. It hadn't changed much since Rowena had last crossed its border nearly 6 months ago. Her presence drew attention like a match to Tinder. Inside the Dry Cactus Saloon, she found who she was looking for. Virgil Crane, ex-deputy, crackshot, loyal only to coin. "Rowena Sinclair," he said, tipping his hat but not smiling. "Heard your ranch is about to fall into the ground. Didn't think you'd show your face. Need a tracker, quiet, fast, reliable." He leaned back in his chair, boots thumping onto the table. "And what's this tracker hunting? The Hollow Eye?" The words drained the color from his face. He sat upright. "That's a name you don't say out loud unless you're holding a shovel. To your own grave. They burned a homestead south of my fence line. They're coming for something on my land." Virgil narrowed his eyes. "That something wouldn't happen to be a vault near Old Crossing?" Rowena didn't answer. He cursed softly. "I've seen it, once, years ago." Whole camp vanished, only the ashes left, and a mark. An eye split with 3 cuts. She leaned forward. "So you're in?" Virgil stared at her for a long moment. "You'll pay?" "I'll feed you, pay you, and bury you proper if it goes wrong." He nodded once. "I'm in." By week's end, the ranch had become a fortress. Rowena's cattle were herded west, away from the coming fight. Her remaining hands, 2 quiet brothers from Calico Ridge, were armed and informed. Virgil set traps along the gully road and reinforced. The barn rafters with iron plates. Silva mapped the vault's path from memory, drawing a crude but detailed outline of the canyon rocks, an altar marked with runes, and a tunnel mouth sealed by a rusted iron door. The Hollow Eye couldn't be far. And that night, they came. It started with fire. The southern pasture lit up in sudden flame. Smoke curled into the sky like a scream. Rowena and Virgil moved fast. He took the ridge with a long rifle. Rowena circled, wide, shotgun in hand. Silva hid in the bunker beneath the barn. The first attacker wore a black duster and a carved bone mask. He crept through the mesquite, unaware Rowena was behind him. She didn't hesitate. 1 blast from the shotgun ended him. 2 more came from the east, silent, careful. Virgil dropped 1 clean through the skull. The other vanished into the shadows. By dawn, 4 bodies lay at the edge of Rowena's land, all marked with the Hollow Eye symbol. None spoke a word. None left any sign of origin, but it was a message. We are here. We are close. You cannot stop us. Rowena buried the bodies without ceremony. But Silva stood at each grave and whispered a phrase in her mother's tongue. Each time, the wind shifted. What are you saying? Rowena asked, words to keep their spirits from returning. Rowena stared. Is that superstition? It's protection. From what? Rowena didn't ask because she wasn't sure she wanted to know. 3 nights later, Silva disappeared. Rowena woke just before dawn to an empty bunk. The knife was gone. So was the girl. She saddled her horse in under a minute. Virgil met her at the edge of the corral, rifle slung over his shoulder. Tracks, small, eastbound. They rode hard, following hoofprints and bent grass. By noon, they reached the Old Crossing. Silva stood in the canyon mouth, arms spread, facing the iron door embedded in stone. Her lips moved in silent prayer. The Hollow Eye surrounded her 6 men in black coats, bone masks, and eyes like extinguished lanterns. 1 step forward. She comes willingly. Rowena didn't dismount, didn't raise her gun. Let her go. She is the key. Then you're locked out forever. The leader raised his hand. Virgil fired. The shot ripped through the mask, splintering bone. The man fell without a sound. Rowena dismounted and moved fast. She grabbed Silva, pulling her back as the rest of the Hollow Eye surged forward. Gunfire echoed through the canyon. Stone shattered. Dust choked the air. Rowena ducked behind a boulder, pressing Silva to the ground. "Why did you leave?" "They showed me dreams, said I had to come or more would die." "Don't believe their lies. We fight, not surrender." Virgil dropped another attacker, but a bullet grazed his thigh. He grunted, reloading. Rowena peeked around the rock. "Two left." "Both flanking," she nodded to Virgil. He understood. He rolled left, drawing their fire. Rowena rose and fired twice. Both shots hit. Both men dropped. Silenced. She stood panting, heart hammering. The iron door loomed behind them, untouched, unmoved. "They'll come again," Silva said softly. "Then we destroy the key," Rowena said. "Burn every map. Collapse this canyon if we have." "T.O." Silva touched her sleeve. "Or we seal it better than before, so it never wakes. Ever." Rowena looked at her and nodded. They had work to do. And it was only beginning. The sun had barely begun to rise above the mesa when Rowena stood before the iron vault again, the same one that had become the center of every nightmare and strategy she'd wrestled with over the past week. Her coat flapped in the cold morning breeze, rifle slung low across her back, while beside her, Silva knelt in the red dust, palms flat against the canyon floor. It had been 3 days since they'd fought off the last advance from the Hollow Eye. 3 days of silence and uneasy preparation. Virgil had taken a hit to the thigh but hadn't left. He hobbled on a cane now, one boot thudding and one leg dragging as he patrolled the ranch's perimeter. His rifle still barked true whenever he spotted movement on the ridge. Rowena trusted few men. Virgil Crane was one of them. But she still didn't tell him everything. Silva had changed. Not in any physical way. Her hair was still tangled, her eyes still shadowed, but something in her gaze had sharpened, hardened. There was an oldness in the girl now, an echo of something that didn't belong to a child. That morning, as they studied the vault again, Silva drew a line across the dirt with one finger. A shape followed. A series of symbols that looked like claw marks coiled in a spiral. "They tried to force it open last night," she said, her voice hollow. "I felt it." Rowena nodded. "How far did they get?" "Not far. They don't have the words. They don't have the blood." Rowena crouched beside her. "But you do." Silva's eyes flicked to hers. "That's why they won't stop. Not until I'm dead, or they have me. Then we make sure it's neither." They walked back to the horses in silence. That evening, Rowena called a council in the barn. It was a poor man's war room, hay bales as chairs, a lantern flickering over a table littered with maps, spent cartridges, and crude charcoal sketches of the vault seal. Virgil sat with one leg stretched, sipping coffee with something stronger mixed in. The Calico Ridge brothers, Sam and Ely, leaned against the wall, silent and grim. Even the preacher from Jericho. Flats had come. Reverend Ellis stood stiffly in his long coat, his thin white collar stark against the grime of travel. Rowena looked each of them in the eye before she spoke. "There's no time left for doubt. We're not up against rustlers or bounty hunters. The Hollow Eye is older than we thought. Older than this land, maybe. They want the vault open, and they want Silva to do it." The preacher frowned. "Are you saying this child holds the key to something supernatural?" Rowena didn't blink. "I'm saying we don't know. And that's the part that scares me," Sam muttered. "I've seen what their bullets do. Doesn't feel like superstition. Feels like war." "It is," Silva said, stepping into the lantern's glow. Her presence seemed to silence the room. "They serve something older than God, older than this desert. If they get in, it won't just be Mesa Diablo that burns." The preacher swallowed visibly. Eli crossed himself. "So what do we do?" Virgil asked, voice flat. "We finish what her mother started," Rowena said. "We bury the vault, lock it in stone. Then we take the fight to them. We end this before it ends us." No one objected. They rode out that night. The canyon air was cold, sharp as broken glass. Moonlight filtered through rock spires, painting the vault in silver. The iron door was unchanged, still sealed, still humming with a quiet menace. Silva approached first. She knelt before it, placing her hands on the surface. "There are 3 bindings," she whispered. "Blood, word, and stone. If we reinforce them, they won't be able to open it, not without destroying the entire canyon." "Then that's what we do," Rowena said. She turned to the others. "Sam, Eiley, start rigging the charges. We collapse the walls when she's done. Preacher, I need your prayers, all of them." "And me?" Virgil asked. Rowena handed him the long-range rifle. "You watch the ridge. If they show, give me enough warning to finish it." The work began. Silva carved words into the stone with a piece of bone she pulled from her boot. The symbols glowed faintly, and each stroke seemed to draw blood from her fingers. Reverend Ellis whispered Latin under his breath, sometimes shaking, sometimes shouting. Rowena stayed close, hammering iron stakes into the canyon floor. Each one marked a point of collapse. Then they came. At first, it was wind. A sudden gust that twisted through the canyon, snuffing lanterns, kicking dust. Then came the sound like whispers made of glass. Dozens, hundreds. Virgil fired. Once, twice. "They're on the ridge," he shouted. Rowena turned. Figures in black cloaks moved through the moonlight, bone masks glowing. "Too many." "Sam, Eli, detonators ready? 2 minutes." Sam yelled. "We don't have 2 minutes," Virgil growled. He dropped another hollow eye member at the ridge's edge. Rowena ran to Silva. "How much longer?" "Almost done." "Just 1 more seal." The air thickened. The vault pulsed. Rowena felt it, something waking inside. "They're stalling us," she said. "They don't need to win. They just need time." "We won't give it to them," Silva said. She pressed both hands to the final seal. It flashed. The canyon shook. The iron door let out a groan like the earth crying out. Then it quieted. "Done," Silva whispered, and collapsed. "Sam, blow it, now." The charges lit the sky. Rock split. Stone rained down. The vault vanished beneath tons of rubble. The hollow eye screamed, not with voices, but with something deeper. An agony that echoed through bone and blood. Then they vanished. When dawn came, the canyon was sealed. The ridge was empty. Rowena carried Silva to the horses. Virgil covered the retreat. Sam and Eli limped behind, dust-streaked and bleeding but alive. At the ranch, the preacher burned the last remnants of the maps. Virgil set his traps again. Sam and Eli packed their things, said they were heading east. "Too much blood here," Eli said. "Too much shadow." Rowena didn't stop them. She understood. That night, she sat on the porch with Silva wrapped in a blanket beside her. "You did it," Rowena said. "No," Silva replied. "We did." The desert wind sighed across the hills. Peace had returned. For now, but Rowena knew better then. To believe in forever. She'd learned that sometimes victory didn't look like triumph. Sometimes it looked like survival. And sometimes that was enough. The wind that brushed across Mia Diablo carried a different tone now. No longer a whisper of dread, but something raw, emptier. It was the silence after battle, after truth had been dug up and buried again, this time under more than just soil and rock. In the distance, buzzards circled a hill they'd yet to descend upon. The world wasn't healed, but it was breathing again. Rowena Sinclair stood on her porch at sunrise, arms folded, boots damp with dew, her eyes tracing the eastern fence line. She hadn't slept. Silva hadn't either. The girl hadn't said much since the vault had been sealed and the canyon collapsed, but Rowena didn't press her. Some wounds needed time before words could touch them. Virgil limped across the yard, rifle slung casually despite the brace strapped to his leg. "You see that?" Rowena didn't look at him. The southern fence again? He grunted. Wires down. Third time in 2 days. Rowena's jaw flexed. They're testing it. Yup, the hollow eye? Virgil shrugged. Could be. Could be locals getting ideas. Word spreading about what happened out there. She finally turned to him. What are they saying? That you stood in front of a god and didn't blink, Rowena snorted. I didn't stand in front of anything. Just a vault. Same difference far as most are concerned. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. I don't want to be a story, Virgil, he chuckled. Too late. Inside the barn, Silva was combing Amare's mane with quiet precision. She didn't react when Rowena entered. The girl's hands moved methodically, fingers deft and sure, despite the tremor that had taken root in her right hand since the night of the collapse. You eating today? Rowena asked. Later, Silva murmured. Rowena approached slowly, setting down a tin plate with cornbread and jam. You should eat while it's warm. I'm not sick, I know. Silva finally looked up. They're not gone. Rowena sat on a hay bale. No, but they're scattered. Broken. Silva returned to the mane. That's not the same as gone. No, it's not. They sat in silence. The Mare nickered and shifted. Silva said, They'll try again. Rowena nodded. And we'll be ready. By the end of the week, the sky had begun to shift. Clouds rolled in from the west. Thick and dark. Thunderheads stacked along the horizon like mountains. The desert's dry breath turned sticky with moisture, the air rich with the scent of incoming rain. It hadn't stormed in months. Now it felt inevitable. Rowena took it as a sign. Time to rebuild, or at least fortify. With Virgil's help. She reinforced the bunkhouse doors with steel braces, lined the root cellar with gravel and fresh lumber, and patched every window that groaned when the wind picked up. Silva painted the runes again on doors, on stones, even on the barn roof. Rowena let her. She didn't pretend to understand their meaning, but she'd seen them work. That was enough. On the second Sunday, a stranger arrived. He came at dusk. On foot, coat flapping like wings, wide-brimmed hat shadowing most of his face. He had a limp, subtle but real, and wore gloves despite the heat. No horse. No dust on his boots. He looked like he'd been born of the wind. Rowena met him at the gate. You're on private land, she said. The man smiled without warmth. Heard tell of a rancher who bought a girl with a coin purse and a death wish. Rowena didn't move. You heard wrong. I also heard she stood in front of a sealed vault and told the dark to go back to sleep. Rowena's fingers drifted to the revolver at her hip. What do you want? The man tilted his head. To see if the stories were true, to see if you were. You saw. Now go. He turned, paused. The hollow eye's not finished. The vault was just the start. There are others. Keys. Doors. You've got one of them under your roof. Rowena's voice went quiet. If you come near her, I'll bury you so deep the worms won't find you. He smiled again. That's the part one came to see. Then he walked away, vanishing into the oncoming storm. That night, the rain came. Hard. It washed away dust, soaked the earth, filled the dry creek bed. Lightning cracked over the mesa. The cattle bellowed and the chickens scattered. Rowena watched. From her porch, coat drawn tight, hat low, Silva stood beside her, bare feet in the mud, hair plastered to her scalp. The rain ran down her face like tears, though she didn't cry. They know I'm here, she whispered. I know. They're coming. Let them. Silva looked up. Why do you keep standing with me? Rowena turned to her, eyes fierce. Because you stood too, when they had you chained. When they tried to break you, you stood. That's all the reason I'll ever need. Silva's lip trembled. She nodded. They stood in silence as the storm tore across the land, but neither flinched. The following week brought more visitors, some with curiosity, some with coin, some with quiet desperation. A mother with 3 children asked to stay. Husband had vanished near Jericho Flats. A grizzled ex-soldier offered his rifle in exchange for a cot. A woman named Bellamy rode in on a black mare, a bounty hunter with hollow eye scars across her throat. She said nothing, but she stayed. Rowena made room for them all. Mesa Diablo had become something else, a refuge, a barricade, a bulwark against whatever came next. The final night of the month, Virgil approached Rowena on the porch. "You ready for what's coming?" She looked out across her land, fences mended, lights burning in every window, patrols rotating every few hours. "No," she said. "But I'm not running either," he nodded. "Silva's growing, stronger, louder. She's not a weapon. She's more than a child." "She's mine," Rowena said. "That's what matters." Virgil didn't argue. "They'll come for her. Let them come," he smiled. "Then we'd best be ready to teach them the meaning of regret." Rowena said nothing, but her hand tightened on the railing. The storm had passed, but the war hadn't. It was only beginning. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. Rainwater pooled in shallow hollows along the main trail of Mesa Diablo. Each small puddle reflecting an overcast sky hung heavy with unresolved tension. The earth, softened by the storm, squelched under boots and hooves alike. The air was thick, with the scent of wet sagebrush, split pine, and something subtler unease. Like even the land knew that the battle had only paused, not ended. Rowena Sinclair felt it in her bones. She moved through her ranch like a guardian now, a rifle always within reach. Her eyes trained to catch every shift in light, every whisper of movement. The people who'd come in the wake of the collapse, the broken, the brave, the haunted remained. And together they were reforging Mesa Diablo into something stronger. But even iron rusts. That morning, Virgil limped out of the bunkhouse with a telegram in hand. The wire line had only just been repaired after the storm. The paper trembled slightly in his fingers. "It's from Stillwater," he muttered. Handing it to Rowena, she scanned the message. "I moving east. 3 dead in Miners Ridge. Request aid or warn others. Sheriff Tully." Rowena's jaw clenched. She folded the paper once, twice, slid it into her coat. "Sheriff Tully doesn't spook easy," Virgil said. "He's not spooked. He's outnumbered. You thinking of riding out?" She glanced east. The hills that way rolled into Badlands, then into open salt flats, finally into Miners Ridge. A day's ride. "I'm thinking if the Hollow Eye's making moves again, we can't let them gather steam. You ride out, you leave the ranch vulnerable. Not if you hold it." Virgil raised a brow. "You trust me that much?" "I trust you more than myself some days." He shook his head but said nothing more. Silva found Rowena in the barn, saddling Blue, the only horse fast enough to make Stillwater before nightfall. "You're leaving." Rowena didn't look up. "Just for a day, maybe 2. "I should go with you." "No, why not?" Rowena met her gaze. "Because they want you to." Silva frowned. "They want me alive, exactly. That gives me leverage. Here, I can protect you. Out there." Silva turned away, frustrated. But she didn't argue further. Before Rowena mounted, Silva handed her a small cloth-wrapped bundle. "What's this?" "Runes. For luck. And a warning. One of them's not what they seem." Rowena tucked it into her coat without asking further. She trusted Silva the way you trusted a spring in the desert. You didn't always know where it came from, but you drank. The ride to Stillwater was uneventful until dusk, when the first signs of violence appeared. A wagon overturned. Bullet holes in the canvas, no horses. No bodies. Then a shack, its door splintered inward. Blood on the threshold, but no sign of the family that had lived there. A child's shoe left behind in the mud. Rowena didn't stop. She pressed on, jaw tight. Stillwater emerged at the base of a bluff like a dying ember. Lights flickered in 2 windows, and smoke rose from the saloon's chimney. But otherwise the town was silent. She rode in slow, hand resting on her revolver. Sheriff Tully met her on the steps of the jailhouse. He was a broad-shouldered man with more gray than black in his beard, and a limp that mirrored Virgil's. "Rowena," he greeted with a nod. "Didn't think you'd come," you asked. "They've been picking us off one by one. 5 folks gone missing. 3 we found shot. Not robbed, just taken," Rowena dismounted. "Where's the rest of your people? Left last week." "Families headed for San Dimas or Salt Bluff. Those of us who stayed, we're not sleeping much." "Where were they last seen?" He pointed north. "The mine, Old Shaft 7. Been closed for years, but something lit it up last night. Looked like torchlight, but wrong. Blue and green, flickering like swamp fire." "You go near it?" He shook his head. "I ain't a fool. You're not alone anymore. I'll take a look." Rowena approached the mine before midnight, wind tugging at her coat. The entrance gaped like a jaw, and the torches Tully had mentioned were real, though calling them torches felt wrong. They hovered without bases, flames suspended mid-air, casting sickly light against the stone. She unwrapped Silva's bundle, runes, painted in blood and ash, on thin wooden strips. One glowed faintly when held near the cave mouth. She pocketed it, drew her rifle, and stepped inside. The tunnel walls pulsed. Not literally, but seemed to. The air was too still, the silence too complete. Her footsteps echoed like hammer blows, then dash voices. Not speaking, whispering, words in no language she knew. She crouched behind a rock. OUTCROPPING. 2 figures stood in the main chamber. Cloaked, hooded, one taller. One no. She blinked. The smaller one wasn't hooded. It was a child. Silva? No. Not Silva, but close. Same height. Same build. The taller figure raised a hand and began drawing shapes in the air. The child mirrored them. Rowena felt her skin crawl. They were teaching. A hollow eye elder, instructing a young apprentice. Rowena raised her rifle, but hesitated. If the child was willing. Was she still a child, or something else entirely? She lowered the barrel and backed out of the tunnel. Not this way. Not like this. She returned to still water before dawn. "We need to talk," she told Tully. "And then you need to burn that mine to the ground." By the time Rowena returned to Mesa Diablo, her coat was singed and her hands smelled of kerosene. Silva met her at the gate. "You saw one of them," she said. Rowena nodded. "A child." "Not anymore. Not once they learned the glyphs." Rowena looked at her, really looked. "That could have been you. Still could be, if I let it. You won't." "I won't," Silva agreed. Together they walked inside, the wind curling around them like a warning. Mesa Diablo was safe, for now. But the hollow eye was teaching, growing. And Rowena Sinclair knew one thing beyond any doubt. Next time, the battle wouldn't be at her gates. She'd have to ride into the storm, herself, and she would. Because some things, some people, are worth saving. No matter the cost. The morning sun rose sluggishly over Mesa Diablo, casting fractured gold through the breaks in cloud that still lingered from last week's storm. The ranch pulsed with a quiet rhythm. Fences creaked, horses nickered in the paddock, and the scent of wet earth still clung to everything. Yet beneath the stillness, an undertow of dread remained. Rowena Sinclair felt it like a splinter buried deep. It was in the way the chickens refused to peck near the root cellar. In how blue, her statiest mare, shied from the eastern ridge every evening. In the dreams, those unbearable fragments of memory and something else that Silva now endured. Nightly. More than once, Rowena had woken to find the girl kneeling at the window of the bunkhouse, fingers sketching symbols in condensation as she whispered names in her sleep. Names Rowena dared not write down. She didn't tell Silva that she, too, was dreaming now, of vaults not yet uncovered, of cities buried beneath the desert, of a black sun rising. The stranger returned, not from the east, where Rowena had seen him vanish, but from the north, arriving just before dusk with dust on his boots this time and a raven perched on his shoulder. Rowena met him halfway down the main trail, rifle slung casually in her arms. "You have no business here." The stranger smiled without humor. "You said that before. I came anyway. You planning to test me?" "No," he tilted his head. "I came to offer warning. You want to live, you'll walk away." He raised one hand in mock surrender. The raven ruffled its feathers but didn't caw. "There's another door," he said. Rowena's stomach clenched. "You're lying." "Am I?" asked the girl. She's already dreaming about it. A city buried in glass. A tower beneath the salt. Rowena's jaw worked. "Why warn us?" "Because even the Hollow. I fears what sleeps in that place. And because—" He paused, eyes softening slightly. "Because once, long ago, I was like her." Rowena didn't move. Didn't breathe. The man bowed slightly and turned away. "You'll know the place by its silence. No birds, no wind. Just sand and the smell of old stone." He walked back into the desert without another word. Rowena stood there a long time before returning. That night, Silva confirmed it. "There's something under the salt flats," she whispered. "I see it when I sleep. I smell rust and stone and grief." "A vault?" Silva nodded. "Worse." Rowena took a long breath. "You think they're looking for it?" "They already know where it is. They're just waiting. Gathering." Silva looked up. For me, Rowena didn't speak. She simply took Silva's hand. The next day, Rowena gathered her makeshift council. Virgil, Bellamy, Preacher Ellis, the Calico Ridge brothers had gone, but others had taken their place. Mara, a traveling medic. Tobias, a miner with dynamite. "In his bloodline, there's another vault," she said. "Salt Flats, 3 days south. They're gathering again." Bellamy leaned against the barn post, arms crossed. "You want to stop them before they open it?" "Yes, then we ride." Virgil raised an eyebrow. "You sure this ain't suicide?" Rowena met his eyes. "Might be, but it's the only way we live." They made ready. The journey south was brutal. The sun hung overhead like judgment. Water ran low. One of the horses went lame and had to be put down. But they pressed on. On the second night, they camped beneath petrified trees, their branches sharp as claws. Silva didn't sleep. She sat beside Rowena, knees tucked to her chest. "If I go into the vault," she said, "I might not come back." Rowena looked at her. "Then you don't go in. You don't understand. I can hear it. Calling. It's familiar. That's how they get you." "Maybe, but what if that's also how we stop it?" Rowena shook her head. "You're not a weapon." Silva smiled faintly. "No, but maybe I'm a key, and a key chooses whether to open or close." They reached the flats on the 4th day, a vast ocean of cracked white salt spread before them, silent and shimmering. No wind, no birds, just silence, and the ruin. A city half buried, sprawled in skeletal lines beneath the surface. Domes, towers, roads, all made of glass and iron and something older. In the center, a black spire, broken, twisted, waiting. The hollow eye had beaten them there. Dozens of tents, fires, horses, and figures moving like shadows across the ruins. "They're trying to find the door," Bellamy said. "They're close," Silva whispered. Rowena turned to her people. "We don't let them open it." They nodded. War came swift. They struck at dawn. Tobias set charges at the northern ridge. Bellamy picked off sentries. Virgil led a flanking maneuver. Rowena and Silva charged straight in. The hollow eye fought like fanatics, screaming, burning, chanting. But Mesa Diablo fought harder. Then the spire cracked, and the vault opened. The ground trembled. Light spilled. Upward, green and violet and sick with memory. Figures emerged. Not men, not anymore. Things that had slept too long. Rowena screamed for retreat, but Silva ran forward. She stood in the vault's mouth, arms raised. The runes on her skin glowed. "I know you," she whispered. "I name you, I bind you." And the light collapsed. The vault screamed. Then silence. When Rowena reached her, Silva had collapsed. The vault was gone. Sealed. Forever. They buried the bodies. Counted the cost. But the hollow eye was broken. For now, Rowena carried Silva home. And this time, when the girl woke, she smiled. "It's done," she said. Rowena nodded. Mesa Diablo had survived, because one girl had stood, and one woman had stood with her. Together, they had rewritten the end of the story. And begun a new one. Let me know when you're ready for part 8. Dawn spilled quietly across the ridges of Mesa Diablo, warm but shy, as though even the sun wasn't quite sure it should return. After everything, the vault in the salt flats, the scream of something ancient being sealed again, Rowena Sinclair was still standing. Scarred, bruised, worn to the edge, but standing. Silva was alive. That had become the only measure that mattered. She slept for 2 days straight. Fevered, murmuring names only the wind knew. Rowena sat beside her bunk for most of it, feeding her broth when she could, wiping the sweat from her brow, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Outside, the ranch ran like clockwork. Virgil and Bellamy held things together. Mara doctored the injured. Tobias reinforced every structure on the property. They all waited to see if the girl would rise. And then, on the third morning, she did. Rowena was pouring coffee when Silva walked into the kitchen of the main house barefoot, eyes red-rimmed, but steady. She paused in the doorway, as if unsure whether the world beyond it was real. "You're awake," Rowena said, careful not to sound too relieved. Silva nodded slowly. "How long?" 3 days. You scared the hell out of us." "Did we win?" Rowena hesitated. "We survived. The vault's sealed." The hollow eyes scattered. Silva moved to the table and sat. Rowena set a mug in front of her. The girl cradled it like a prayer. "I remember most of it," she said. "But not the end. Not what I said. You said their name. Whatever was inside, you named it. Bound it." Silva's lips tightened. "That name isn't supposed to be known. Not by people. You're not just a person." "No," she whispered, "I'm not." For a while, peace settled over the ranch like fine ash, fragile, easily disturbed. Rowena resumed repairs. Silva read old books in the shade of the corral. Virgil practiced with the newcomers, ex-scouts, hunters, wanderers drawn by rumors of a sanctuary where the hollow eye had been stopped. Rowena didn't stop them. She let them come, because deep down, she knew it wasn't over. Bellamy confirmed it when she returned from scouting the Southern Trail. "Someone's gathering their survivors," she said. "Not many left, but the ones who are. They're angry, aimless. They want something to point at." "You mean us," Rowena said. Bellamy nodded. "There's a new name whispered out there. Not a god, a person, a child." Rowena didn't ask. She knew. "They're going to call her the last key. Then we'll show them she's also the lock." 2 weeks later, a rider came. Fast, dust-caked, barely conscious. Rowena recognized him. Jonah Odell, a ranch hand who'd left a month back to join his uncle's homestead in Sun Hollow. He made it to the porch before collapsing. Virgil and Mara carried him inside. It took hours before he spoke. "They're digging again," he rasped. "Not in the flats, in the canyons. The red ones west of Shadow Pass." Rowena's blood went cold. The western canyons were old. Older than the mesa. Older than even the tribes. Remembered, the ground there hummed. "They think there's another vault?" she asked. "Not a vault," Jonah said. "A stairwell, down," Rowena stood. "Then we stop them before they start." She assembled a team that night. Virgil, Bellamy, Tobias, and 3 newcomers: Lena, a soft-spoken tracker with hawk eyes; Diego, a former cavalryman; and Ruth, a mute woman whose blade sang when she moved. Silva insisted on coming. "No," Rowena said. "You're still healing. I'm the only one who'll know what they're trying to wake. That's exactly why I'm not letting you go. Then you'll lose." Rowena stared at her. The same girl she'd found chained to a fence now stood as steady as the mesa behind her. "You've already given enough," Rowena whispered. "Then let me give more. Let me finish it." Rowena looked away, jaw tight, then nodded once. They rode out at first light. The journey to the Red Canyons took 4 days. The closer they got, the worse. The nights became no dreams. No sleep, just silence. Even the coyotes stayed away. On the 5th morning, they reached the ridge. Below, tents, tools, and machines made of brass and bone. Hollow eye banners fluttered above stone pillars half unearthed. A stairwell yawned in the canyon floor. Black as pitch, Silva collapsed. Rowena caught her. "It's already awake," Silva whispered. Rowena helped her sit. "Can we still stop it?" "Maybe. But we have to go down." Bellamy muttered a curse. Rowena straightened. "Then we go. All of us together." The descent into the canyon was slow, each step harder than the last. The hollow eye guards were gone, dead or vanished. Their tools abandoned. No sign of life. No sound but the wind, and then not even that. The stairwell plunged beneath the canyon like a wound. Carved stone. Symbols older than memory. Rowena led the way, torch high. Silva walked beside her, silent. Watchful. They reached a door, not iron, not stone, flesh, living. Breathing flesh that pulsed with memory. Silva stepped forward and pressed her hand against it, its side, then opened. Inside, a chamber, a throne, and a being made of shadow and bone, watching. "You are late," it said. Silva stepped forward. "You are done. You carry the name. You bear the seal. You could open every door, or close them," she said. "Why fight? You could rule." "Because I remember." Rowena stepped beside her. She remembers. Pain, loss, chains. You offer power. We offer peace. The being hissed, "Peace is a lie." "So are you," Silva said. She raised her hand. The runes burned. The chamber shook. The being screamed. Then it shattered. The canyon collapsed. They barely escaped. Dust and light and memory swallowed the red stones whole. Back on the ridge, Rowena held Silva as the girl cried. Not in pain. Not in fear, but because it was done, truly done. When they returned to Mesa Diablo, the land felt different. Not healed, but cleaner. They planted a tree where the bunkhouse once stood. Silva placed her final rune at its roots. Rowena asked, "Will there be more?" Silva nodded. "There are always more." Rowena smiled. "Then we'll face them, together." And for the first time since she'd bought the girl for a handful of coins, she believed it. The war was over, but the Guardians remained, and under the sunlit sky of Mesa Diablo, they stood watch. Ready. Let me know when you're ready for part 9. Wind swept across the plains, scattering seeds and ash alike. The scars left by war, some of them ancient, others fresh, stretched across the land like buried bones. Mesa Diablo stood quiet under the morning sun, each building casting long shadows across ground that had known fire, blood, and miracle. And from the highest ridge, where a young tree had been planted and a rune burned into its base, one could see that the world had changed. The hollow eye was gone, but change brings consequence. Rowena Sinclair woke with the sound of hammering. It came from the south fence. She didn't rush to investigate. The ranch had grown again, and not just in numbers. It was a small town now. Livestock fields stretched further. The bunkhouse had expanded. Bellamy was building a smithy. Mara ran a clinic from the old carriage shed, and Silva. Rowena looked toward the bunkhouse window. She wasn't there. She found Silva in the orchard, barefoot in the loam, holding a book, older than the ranch itself. She was humming quietly, something that echoed the old chants but gentler, threaded with warmth rather than command. "You dream again?" Rowena asked. Silva shook her head. "No, but others do. I feel them." Rowena leaned against a tree. "Something coming?" Silva turned a page. The symbols flickered. "Not yet, but something stirring, something new." Rowena hated the sound of that. We just stopped something old. Do we really need something new? "It's always new," Silva said. "That's the trick. They change their names, their faces. But they're always after the same thing, which is control." Later that afternoon, a stranger arrived. A tall woman with sun-bleached braids, wearing a navy duster and riding a jet-black horse. She didn't smile, didn't blink much either. Said her name was Harkin. "I'm with the cartographers." Rowena raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "An old order. We used to map stars. Now we map disturbances." "Magic disturbances?" "We don't use that word. But yes, we've tracked a fluctuation northwest of here past Shroud Creek. You're on our list of high activity zones. That a compliment or a warning, a request?" "We want Silva." Rowena didn't move, didn't breathe. Her hand drifted near her belt. "Not to take," Harkin added, "to advise. She's already made her mark. The world is changing. She can help shape how." Rowena folded her arms. "And if I say no?" Harkin shrugged. "We go to the next one on the list, but they won't be ready. You know that. Silva's a child. She's not anymore." That night, Rowena brought it to Silva. "You ever hear of the cartographers?" Silva nodded. "They walk between stories. They don't pick sides, but they record everything. She wants you to leave, to travel, to help others. I don't like it." "I know. You want to go?" Silva looked out the window. "I think I have to." Rowena's heart cracked. "I'll come back," Silva whispered. Rowena turned away. "I know." Preparations took days. The ranch buzzed with tension. But also pride. Bellamy gave Silva a dagger, carved from bone. Mara packed tinctures, and poultices. Tobias gave her a map etched in coal. Rowena gave her blue. "She's yours now," she said. "She's got more sense than most people anyway." Silva hugged her. Not with the fear of a child, but the strength of someone who had learned the cost of love. "You'll write?" Rowena asked. "Every week. If I don't hear from you, you'll come find me. I know." She left at dawn. Harkin rode ahead. Silva looked back once. Just once. Rowena waved, then turned away before she could cry. Weeks passed. The ranch thrived. A school opened in the old bunkhouse. Bellamy started forging weapons for other towns. Maraz clinic was packed every market day, but Rowena still kept a bed made up in the main house for letters, for stories, for Silva. Then one morning, a writer arrived. Not Silva, but a young boy, no older than 10, wearing a bandage around his eye and clutching a scroll. "Are you Rowena Sinclair?" he asked. "I am." "Then this is for you." He handed it over. It bore a rune. Rowena opened it. Inside, a sketch. A village with trees on fire, figures with black eyes. And Silva, at the center, holding the light back with both hands. At the bottom, "Come if you can. I'll hold until then." Rowena folded the parchment, her heart pounding. Virgil stepped up beside her. "What now?" She looked east. "We ride." The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Let me know when you're ready for part 10. The road ahead is about to get darker." Title: A Struggling Rancher Part 20. The Sky That Wrote Back. It began with a single star. Flickering, then blinking, then writing. A ribbon of light unfolded across the sky, looping and curving in radiant calligraphy. The entire mesa paused. Even the animals stilled. The sky was speaking. Not in thunder, not in storm, but in script. Nova stood beneath the ink tree, her hair silver, her spine slightly bent from years of holding stories. Kieran stood beside her, taller now, wiser in the quiet way of those who learned from everything they chose not to say. The sky wrote, "Are you ready to be remembered?" Nova placed her palm on the tree. Yes. The pillar of pages lit from root to crown. The orchards bloomed out of season. Every apple sang. The ledger, long dormant, opened on its own and turned pages that shimmered like starlight from the sky. Beams of light descended, not destructive, preserving. They swept across Solara, touching walls. Names, artifacts, faces, archiving not on paper, but in cosmic permanence. The stories of Solara were no longer bound to bark or ink or voice. They were being etched into the very fabric of the sky. Rowan's garden bloomed with luminescent ivy. Echo's grave pulsed like a heartbeat. Silva's name echoed from wind chimes that spun without wind. And Nova, holding Kieran's hand, looked up and asked, "Why now?" The sky responded, "Because even the stars forget, and we ... needed to remember you." Then came the silence, but it was not absence, it was reverence, a silence that hummed with power. Nova stepped forward. "Then let me offer something in return." She raised the mirror shard she'd kept from the day her first self shattered the old lens. It floated, spun, and then projected every page she'd ever written. Every face, every fallen name, every rewritten timeline, every child born of story. She held nothing back. The sky absorbed it all and wept light. Crack opened above the mesa. Not a wound, a hatch. And from it descended figures made of constellation lines, celestial archivists, born of nebula and old memory. They landed in the orchard, kneeling. "We are the astral scribes," one said. "We have not written in 10,000 cycles," Nova bowed. "Then you are welcome home." The astral scribes studied the ink tree. They sang in tones that bent space. They wrote in the wind. And they turned to Kieran. "You carry what we lost." Kieran nodded. "Because you forgot to listen. We are listening now." He raised his stylus, a tool he had carved from Echo's old branch, and began to teach them. In the decades that followed, Solara became the center not just of human story, but of cosmic reconciliation. Lost planets remembered their names. Timelines fused into harmony. Languages long extinct were sung by birds, and the stars began to pulse in rhythm with Solara's orchard bloomed. Nova aged gracefully. She spoke less, listened more. One day, she walked into the orchard and did not return. Not gone. Given. The ink tree bore blossoms in her likeness, and the sky flickered with a message. She lives in the punctuation between stars. Kieran, now grown, became the first story warden. He wore no crown, just a sash of bookmarks. He built towers of language, rivers of metaphor, and sanctuaries where even the most fragile story could be nurtured into truth. Solara thrived. And across the universe, whenever someone closed their eyes and whispered, "Tell me a story," a seed from the mesa took root. The final page of the ledger, blank for centuries, inked itself. The ranch endured. The stories survived. The sky remembered. And from that remembering, everything else was born. Beneath the ink tree, now grown into a forest, children gather. They tell tales of the struggling rancher, of the widow who saved a mesa, of the girl who remembered, of the boy who rewrote. Of the sky that wrote back. And when they finish, the stars blink. Not in closure. In invitation, because every ending, the sky had changed. It wasn't something Rowena Sinclair could explain, not in words that would satisfy logic. But every instinct in her rancher's gut, a fighter's tension, a woman's knowing told her the sky wasn't right. The blue was too pale. The stars were out of place. Even the moon felt like an eye now, wide and waiting. They'd won a battle, but the war was rewriting the world. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the voice stirred. Rowena returned to Mesa Diablo with only half the riders she'd taken. Bellamy was gone. So were two others, Lena and Diego. The townspeople greeted them with grim faces and quiet hands. Mara took Virgil straight to the clinic. He was alive, but not whole. His eyes were scarred with darkness, his voice unsteady. He spoke in fragments. Now, too loud, not voices, not people. Rowena sat beside him for hours, holding his hand. She whispered names, memories, stories. Sometimes he'd blink slowly. Sometimes he'd smile, but he never looked at her. Not really. Silva didn't sleep. Not truly. She meditated under the stars, drew circles in chalk across the barn floor. Lit. Candles that didn't flicker, even in the wind. Rowena asked her, "What are you seeing?" Silva said, "Echoes. From the east. A city that fell before language. A throne that speaks without sound." "Is it real?" Silva nodded. "It wants to be again." A month passed in false peace. The ranch continued its rhythm. Repairs were made. Children played. The forge burned steady. But across the plains, letters came. From Salt Bluff. Whole churches vanishing overnight. From Iron Hook. A mayor whose shadow no longer matched his body. From St. Rance. A girl speaking only in poems, each one foretelling death. The voice wasn't content with one story. It was devouring the library. Rowena gathered a council in the main house. Silva, Mara, Tobias, 3 newcomers from northern towns who had fled. Similar disturbances, Eli, a scarred scribe. Uma, a painter who remembered dreams in detail. And Jonah, now fully recovered, with something new in his eyes. "We can't wait for it to come here," Rowena said. "We track it. We face it." Silva shook her head. "It doesn't leave trails. It leaves holes. Then we follow what's missing." Eli unfurled a map. Places were crossed out, not burned, not destroyed, just forgotten. "This town?" he asked, pointing. "No one remembers it. But I have sketches. It was real, 2 weeks ago. Now the ground's flat. We ride at dawn," Rowena said. "The journey east took them through dead space. No birds. No wind. No color. Just silence. Then on the 6th night, they reached the hollow. It wasn't a crater. Not exactly. It was a place where reality had been peeled away. Buildings flickered in and out like thoughts. Roads twisted. Trees grew sideways. And at the center, a spire made of language. Not stone. Wood. Just words layered, whispering, written in air. Silva knelt beside it. "It's telling stories," she said. "Thousands, all at once. None of them finished." Rowena touched the structure. Her fingers bled immediately. Jonah cried out, "We're being written in." And then they appeared. Figures. Not human, but inspired. By made of ink and silence. The voice had sent its heralds. They fought. Or tried to. Bullets passed through the creatures. Knives did nothing. But Silva stepped forward. She whispered a name. The creature nearest her convulsed and burst into ink. "They have names," she said. "But only if we give them." Rowena understood. They had to rewrite the battle. Not fight it. Remember it differently. She screamed her father's name. Her mother's, Bellamy's, each one shattered a figure. Mara recited childbirth stories. Tobias yelled old war songs. Eli read a poem he hadn't finished. And the voice screamed. Then it came, not a shape, not even a sound, just an absence so pure. It silenced memory. People forgot why they were there. Tobias collapsed. Uma wandered into the trees and disappeared. Rowena fell to one knee. "Silva," the girl walked forward into the silence. "You think you can erase us," she said. "But we are the ink, not the page." The voice pulsed. Silva opened her arms. "I name you." And for the first time, the voice hesitated. She whispered a word. The word bent the air. The ground shook. The spire cracked. And the hollow remembered itself. The buildings returned. The trees straightened. People blinked. Alive again. Silva collapsed. Rowena carried her home. For days she slept. Mara sat by her side. So did Rowena. So did Eli. Then, at last, Silva opened her eyes. "We're not done," she whispered. "I know," Rowena said. "But we're winning," Rowena smiled. "Yes, we are. Let me know when you're ready for part 12. The voice is retreating, but it's not gone. And neither is the price." 3 days after Silva woke, rain came to Mesa Diablo for the first time in months. Not the kind of rain that washed away tracks or flattened crops. This was different. Warmer. Heavier. Almost deliberate. As if the sky was trying to cleanse what had been broken. Rowena stood barefoot in the mud outside the main house, watching the drops streak down her arms like tiny rivers. Around her, the land drank in the water like a memory returned. Children danced. Horses bucked. Even the trees seemed to sigh. Silva joined her quietly, slipping a hand into hers. "It's not just rain," she said. "No, it's a pause." Rowena turned. "You think it's over?" "Not yet. But the voice isn't screaming anymore. It's thinking, rewriting. It'll come again. Different. Then we'll meet it again. Different." Word of Mesa Diablo spread like fire on wind. Refugees arrived from burned towns. Scholars came seeking Silva's wisdom. Broken families sought rebuilding. Preachers, scribes, former Hollow Eye defectors, they all came, asking not just for help, but for story. And so the ranch became something else. A sanctuary, a library, a stronghold. Rowena didn't resist it. She let the barn be turned into a school. Let the forge become a chapel of heat and language. She opened the root cellar and let Silva store runes in jars of honeyed light. "We're not just fighting anymore," Silva said one night. "We're remembering forward." Rowena poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed her one. "What does that mean?" "We're building a memory that hasn't happened yet. So when the voice tries again, we already know how it ends." But peace never lasts. One morning, a woman arrived carrying a box. She looked no older than 30, though her eyes had the weight of centuries. Her name was Mirren, and she wore robes stitched with tiny bones. Her voice was kind. Her hands were not. She placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside, a book with no pages, no text. Just thick parchment bound by sinew. "It's growing," she said. "What is?" Rowena asked. "The unwritten. The voice's final weapon. A book that erases what it touches." "How do you know?" "Because I was once one of its scribes." Rowena's hand twitched toward her holster. Mirren didn't flinch. "I broke faith. I'm here to help you destroy it. But it must be written into first. Only then can it be sealed." Silva stepped forward. With what? With a true story. The next. Weeks passed in a blur. Rowena coordinated defenses. Knowing the voice would sense the box, Silva met nightly with Mirren, the 2 of them scrawling fragments into the unwritten. "It's hungry," Silva said after the first night. "It fights every word." "Then write louder," Rowena replied. The people of Mesa Diablo contributed too. Children dictated dreams. Elders told long-lost fables. Travelers sang lullabies in forgotten tongues. Every word mattered. Every story had weight. But still, the book wasn't full. Then came the whispers. They weren't people, weren't quite creatures. They moved at the edge of vision. Reflected in puddles. Spoke in broken grammar. One appeared. In Silva's room. "She is not enough. You are not enough. The story ends in us." Silva burned it with a memory of Rowena saving her in the storm. "She is always enough," Silva said. The final assault came at dusk. The voice itself didn't arrive, but it sent everything else. Ink. Beasts, burned echoes, forgotten kings, and the last remnants of the Hollow-Eye twisted now, bodies riddled with moving scripture. Rowena led from the front. Mara wielded medicine like a weapon. Tobias with a new prosthetic arm made of carved oak, felled enemies twice his size. Silva stood in the center of the library barn, the unwritten pulsing with light. She wrote faster. They held, barely. Rowena lost 2 ribs to a shadow blade. Virgil, still mostly mute, dragged her from the battlefield and whispered her name until she breathed again. When the ink tide finally broke, the unwritten closed. It locked itself. Silva collapsed. The sky went still. The voice receded. Not defeated. But denied. Mirren took the book away. Said it needed to be buried where language could no longer reach. Rowena didn't ask where that was. She just thanked her. Months passed. Silva's powers quieted. Not gone, just resting. She smiled more. Rowena taught her to ride bareback. Together, they rebuilt the corral. Together they planted trees. Together, they remembered. Mesa Diablo became legend. And stories began again. Let me know when you're ready for part 13, the final chapter. The voice may be silent, but silence is never the end. The stars returned. It was subtle at first. A few more visible each night. Constellations settling back into their proper places. The sky above Mesa Diablo began to breathe again, steady, rhythmic, unburdened. Rowena Sinclair stood on the hill, overlooking the ranch, the wind teasing her braid, the scent of juniper thick in the air. Below her, life pulsed. Children laughing in the orchard, Mara hanging fresh linens on the clinic line, Tobias repairing the northern windmill. And Silva, now taller, her shoulders no longer sloped by fear, was teaching a group of newcomers how to draw protective circles with charcoal and sand. Peace had found them, but Rowena had lived too long to mistake peace for permanence. The last message came from Mirren, delivered by a crow with feathers like script. Rowena, read it by lantern light. The unwritten has been buried beneath the remains of a city once called Quell. The voice has not spoken in 70 days. That is the longest silence since its first whisper. I do not know if we have won, but we have remembered. Rowena folded the note and tucked it into the wooden box where she kept her father's letters. That winter, snow came late, a dusting first, then a deeper fall that turned the mesa silver. The cattle adjusted. The children made sleds out of broken fence boards. Bellamy's cairn wore a shawl of frost, and someone, Rowena suspected Silva, left fresh lavender there each week. The old pain lingered, but it softened. Then came the girl. She arrived barefoot, wearing a coat stitched from different flags. She had no name, no voice, just a symbol carved into her palm, a spiral with 5 slashes. Rowena found her at the edge of the eastern fence, staring at the mountains. Where'd you come from? She asked. The girl said nothing. You hungry? The girl nodded. Rowena offered a hand. The girl took it. They called her Echo. Silva worked with her daily, slowly coaxing meaning from silence. She's a mnemonic, Silva said. A living memory, not hers. Someone else's, maybe something else's. What's she remembering? I don't know yet, but it's important. She was sent by the voice? Silva shook her head. No, something older, or maybe newer, something trying to warn us. The signs returned, not erasures, but echoes, names repeating in dreams, footsteps that ended at cliff edges, stories told twice, in different mouths with the same inflection. Eli, now the town's archivist, brought Rowena a parchment that hadn't existed the day before. A prophecy, written in mirrored script. When the rewritten forget they were once ink, the silence begins again. That night, Rowena sat beside Silva on the bunkhouse roof. You think the voice is returning? I think. Silva hesitated. I think the voice was just one chapter, one method. So now what? We prepare, not for war, for understanding. This time we write first. Rowena smiled. You've gotten strange. I've always been strange. You just caught up. They laughed. Echo spoke her first word 2 weeks later. It was a name, Not hers, Rowena's. And when she said it, the clouds above Mesa Diablo parted, the sun burned brighter, and every child under the age of 10 woke from a dream with the same drawing in hand. A tree made of pages, roots spiraling into stars. They gathered beneath the hanging lanterns of the old library barn. Every person in Mesa Diablo, from ranchers to runecasters, circled around the tree Silva had grown from the last rune. Rowena stepped into the center. She didn't speak from a stage, didn't raise her voice. She just began. This place was once dust, then it became battle, then it became home. But it's always been story, not mine, not Silva's, ours, the stories we choose to keep, the ones we promise to pass on. She took Echo's hand. We are not what was erased. We are what refused to be. Silva stepped beside her. Her eyes glowed faintly. The voice may whisper again. Others may come. But we will meet them not as fear, but as memory, as meaning, as a place named. The people repeated her words, named them, and in that moment, Mesa Diablo sealed itself into the world. No longer forgotten, never erased. In time, Rowena grew old. Her steps slowed. Her hair silved. She no longer rode patrols, no longer held a rifle. But she was always there, in the orchard, in the forge, in the laughter of those who stayed. When she passed, she did so beneath the tree. Echo was the one who closed her eyes. And Silva, now grown, wrote her name into the trunk. Not carved, written, with ink made from stars. 100 years later, travelers from distant lands would find the mesa still standing, still warm, still whispered about. They would ask, was there really a rancher who fought a god with memory? Alone? And the wind would answer, yes, yes, there was. And her story is still being written. The end. Title: A Struggling Rancher Part 14. The Skyward Ledger. The stars had settled, but the sky was not finished speaking. Decades had passed since Rowena Sinclair's name was written into the bark of the storytelling tree beneath the barn at Mesa Diablo. Generations now walked the paths she had cleared, tilled the soil she had healed, and remembered the silence she had once defied. Her story had not ended. It had become foundation. And from that foundation rose a new story. Echo. The girl who had arrived barefoot and voiceless had become the steward of legacy. Time had shaped her into something remarkable, neither prophet nor warrior, yet containing the essence of both. Her voice, once lost, now wove through the mesas in songs only the wind dared repeat. But one morning, before dawn, Echo woke with ink on her hands. Not drawn, not spilled. Grown. The mark spiraled down her forearms' glyphs. Neither Silva nor the village archivist could decode. The tree bark trembled when she approached. Birds fled. Even the wind pulled back. Silva, now a woman with silver in her braid, touched Echo's skin gently. It's not the voice, she said, but it's watching. What is it? Echo whispered. Something. Old, older than names. Does it remember me? Silva looked toward the northeast sky. No, but it remembers her. The next day, Echo left Mesa Diablo. Not in secret, not in sorrow. She packed a satchel of memory stones, 3 seeds from the bark tree, and a ledger, a blank one, bound in hide, fastened with bone. It was called the Skyward Ledger, and it had been given to her by Tobias's granddaughter, who claimed it had once been Bellamy's unfinished forged journal. Write what you see, the girl had said. I will, Echo promised. Her journey took her north through lands Rowena had never seen. Into the canyon of forgotten maps. Through the mirror fields, where reflections aged faster than their owners. And finally to a city made of salt and sound. It was there that she met them. The acolytes of the ledger. They wore no eyes, carried no voices. But when Echo opened the journal in their presence, they knelt. You carry the ink of the true rancher, one whispered without lips. I carry memory, Echo replied. Then you must go to the summit. What's there? The sky's wound. The place where silence was first born. The mountain they sent her to was taller than any in the old lands. Echo climbed alone. For 7 days. No birds. No rain. No shadow. Only wind that whispered names she didn't know she'd forgotten. At the summit, she found a basin. Inside, a pool of ink. Above it, stars that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She opened the skyward ledger, and for the first time the ink on her arms moved, not down but up. Into the book. The pool below boiled. The stars dimmed. And a voice, not the voice, but one deeper, sadder, spoke inside her. "Why do you remember her?" Echo answered aloud. "Because she remembered me before I was ever born." The voice wept. And the mountain cracked. She returned to Mesa Diablo with 3 pages, filled. Each written in ink born from the silence of sky. Silva. Read them by Firelighd. Cried. Burned the first page, buried the second, and copied the third onto the barn wall. It said, "Stories are not just what we keep. They are what keeps us." So began a new age of storytellers who wielded no blades but changed kingdoms, of ranches that taught myth as history, of skies that blinked once a decade just to listen. And Echo, now known far and wide as the Ledger Walker, roamed again. Never to fight. Always to write, because the world still needed memory. And memory still needed Mesa Diablo. Let me know if you'd like to continue into part 15, begin a new character's journey, or start an entirely new saga. The ink hasn't run out yet. Title: A Struggling Rancher Part 15, The Memory That Rode Back. 23 years had passed since Rowena Sinclair's name was spoken into the bark tree. Silva still walked the orchard most mornings, barefoot, her fingertips trailing through the dew on apple leaves. She looked older, shorelines at the corners of her mouth, a limp that came and went with the weather, but age had only deepened her gravity. When she spoke, the mesa listened. Echo had not returned in almost a decade, until now. She came at twilight, riding a wind-burnt mule named Dust. Her braid was streaked with gray. Her cloak bore the emblems of 100 towns, and on her belt hung the skyward ledger, no longer blank. Children ran beside her as she rode into the square. Elders watched from porches, mouths slowly curling into smiles of disbelief. Echo slid down, brushed the trail off her shoulders, and walked to the barn. Silva stood waiting, arms crossed. Neither spoke at first. Then, "Took you long enough," Silva said. Time got complicated. So did the world. They embraced. It was like wrapping arms around a life remembered. That night, they held a gathering, not a celebration. A reckoning. Echo opened the skyward ledger. Its pages flickered with a faint, constant glow. She read 3 passages aloud. One from a town that dreamed itself into fire. One from a woman who carried a graveyard in her hair. One from a child who remembered being born beneath a blue sun that never rose again. Silva listened in silence. When Echo closed the book, Mara, now ancient and blind, spoke from her chair. "These aren't just stories, they're bleed-throughs." "Yes," Echo said. "The fractures are coming faster now." Tobias, bearded and bowed with time, muttered, "Then the voice wasn't the worst of it." Silva shook her head. "The voice was just a gate." The next morning, they found the tree bleeding. Not sap. Ink. It dripped from the lowest branch into the soil, curling letters in ancient languages. Glyphs bloomed on its bark, some reversed. Others crawled. "It's remembering too much," Silva whispered. "Or being forced to remember what doesn't belong," Echo added. She reached out to touch the bark. The tree shuddered. A pulse of memory surged through the orchard, every apple in bloom, every root glowing. Echo's eyes rolled back, and she spoke. "The rancher rides again, not from the past, from the place we tried to forget." That night, Silva and Echo traced the glyphs beneath the barn. A new name had appeared, one no one had ever spoken. Rowan. "Not Rowena," Echo whispered. "Rowan. Silva." Paled, Rowena had no children. Not here, but perhaps in a branch of time we never named. The next day, a stranger arrived, tall, lean, quiet, riding a horse whose mane shimmered like wet ink. He wore no weapon, carried no pack, but his eyes were unmistakably hers, Rowena's. He dismounted, looked at the tree, and knelt. "I am what she left behind," he said. "Are you her son?" Silva asked. He shook his head. "I am her echo." He stood, "And I am here to warn you." That night, Rowan told his story. How in a timeline not chosen, Rowena Sinclair died before Mesa Diablo. How the voice won, how Echo was never found. And how, in the silence that followed, something else came through the gap the voice left behind. A hollow child, made of mirrors. "It's looking for names," Rowan said. "Not to erase, to wear. To become." Silva stood slowly. "And how did you cross into our world?" "The tree called me." Echo nodded. "We opened a door." "And he walked through." Mara whispered, "Then the door can swing both ways." Preparations began, not for war, for witnessing. Every elder began transcribing memories into paper leaves. Children were taught songs in reverse. Runes were drawn in ink that pulsed with names. And Echo, Silva, and Rowan met beneath the tree each night, placing fingers on bark and dreaming together. They saw it. Mirror-child. Shapeless. Endless. A collection of identities stitched together, wearing legends like skin. "It doesn't know who it is," Silva whispered. "It doesn't care," Echo added. "Then we must give it our story," Rowan said. "Why?" "So it remembers wrong. So we confuse it with love, with meaning, with things it can't replicate." The tree gave them one last gift, a seed, laced in gold and wound in memory. "Plant this when the mirror opens," Echo said. "What will grow?" Silva asked. "Something it can't look at, something true." When the mirror split the sky, Mesa Diablo stood ready. Children sang, elders wept. And Rowan stepped into the light. He placed the seed in the soil, and it bloomed instantly. A tree with bark made of mirrors that reflected nothing. The mirror child hesitated. Echo whispered its name. The longing and the creature screamed. Not in pain. In recognition. It folded into the tree and was gone. Mesa Diablo stood, older now. Wiser. The skyward ledger gained its final chapter, and beneath the storytelling tree, 3 names were etched: Rowena. Silva. Echo. The ranch endures, because some stories were never meant to end, only meant to be shared. Let me know if you'd like to begin a new story arc from here, or if you'd like a collected anthology version of the entire saga. Title: A Struggling Rancher Part 16. Beneath the Echo Tree, Mesa Diablo no longer whispered. It sang. Every dusk, the sky rippled with memory. Lanterns flickered in patterns of Morse. Apples glowed faintly before bloom. The ink tree grown from a seed planted at the moment. The mirror split had become the second heart of the mesa. The first was still the people. And at the center of it all, Echo, Silva, and Rowan. In the months following the mirror child's retreat, Mesa Diablo grew, not in numbers, in depth. New rooms appeared beneath the barn pocket dimensions formed by the ledger's presence. Silva led teams down with rune lanterns. Some found archives from futures that had never happened. Others found fragments of stories long thought lost. Bellamy's first poem, Rowena's missing journal entries, Mara's lullabies sung in war. They preserved them. They remembered. But something was changing. The stars had begun moving. Just slightly. Night by night, constellations realigned themselves, not randomly, but deliberately, forming shapes not seen since the days before the first silence. Echo and Rowan lay on the hilltop each night, ledger between them, watching. "They're mapping something," Rowan said. "A return path? Or a warning?" Silva, studying old sky charts, confirmed it. "They're spelling out a name, Whose? Yours. Echo blinked. Why me? Because you've become the new pivot, not just of Mesa Diablo, of the world's memory. One evening, a boy came stumbling through the orchard, burned, bleeding, clutching a ribbon of glowing paper. He was from a town no one remembered, but he remembered Mesa Diablo. "They're coming," he whispered. "The empty chorus." Echo and Silva gathered everyone that night. Rowan read aloud the boy's account, though it hurt him to do so. The empty chorus wasn't an army. It was a phenomenon, a sound that erased song. Silence that screamed. A choir made of voices taken, not given. They came when memories were doubted, when a story was questioned. "We remember everything," Tobias's granddaughter said. "Then they'll try to make you forget," Echo replied. They prepared not with weapons, but with testament. Each household crafted memory stones, hand-sized orbs laced with voice, scent, and sensation. The forge pulsed night and day. Elders sang into clay. Children braided their names into rope. Even the animals bore rune tags to protect their place in the story. And Rowena's Echo began teaching them all how to bind a name so tightly no silence could pull it loose. Then came the hum. It wasn't loud, but it was wrong. Windows cracked, dogs howled, ink bled upward from pages. The orchard turned its branches away from the mesa. Silva stood beside the ink tree. "It's begun." The empty chorus had arrived. They took form not as people, but as moments, fleeting déjà vu, waking dreams, sudden blanks in mid-sentence. And with each gap, a part of someone vanished, a brother forgotten, a story untold, a name misplaced. But then Echo opened the ledger. "You don't get to narrate this," she said. She began rewriting. In real time. As the chorus surged forward, she met them not with memory, but with improvisation. Fiction turned armor, imagination, shield. She gave names to gaps, places to the blank. Faces to the formless, and it held. Silva stood behind her, chanting the names of the fallen. Rowan walked the outer perimeter, sowing voice into the dirt. The people of Mesa Diablo shouted their lives like hymns, and the empty chorus cracked. It didn't scream. It ceased. When morning came, the sky still. The constellations reset. The tree wept ink. Echo collapsed. The ledger closed itself, and Mesa Diablo remained. In the days that followed, Echo dreamed in third person. She saw herself walking beyond the edge of time. Saw Rowena smiling beside her. Saw the voice watching, but not with anger, with curiosity, because even it didn't understand how this place had survived, how these people had not just remembered, but reimagined. Silva woke her one dawn. "The sky has a question." Echo sat up. "What is it?" Silva smiled. "What comes next?" Echo stood, took up the ledger. And began again. "Let me know when you're ready for part 17. The silence has been beaten, but the future has its own voice waiting to be heard." Title: A Struggling Rancher Part 17. The First Word of Tomorrow. The mesa was quiet. Not the fearful kind of quiet that preceded an attack. Not the reverent hush of mourning. This was the quiet of possibility, of a page about to be turned. Echo stood at the base of the ink tree, her hand resting against its bark. The ledger lay on a stone altar nearby, humming faintly, its pages quivering like they were listening to the wind. Silva approached from the forge path, her eyes tired but clear. "It's time," she said. Echo nodded. "To write the first word. Not just any word, the word." Rowan joined them, carrying 3 stones each carved with one name: Rowena, Silva, Echo. They placed them beneath the altar and waited. That night, the sky opened. Not with stars, with text. Runes formed above Mesa Diablo, spinning slowly, speaking not in sound but in presence. Every child felt it. Every animal looked up. The sky wasn't declaring. It was asking. And the question was simple. "What is your name for the future?" They answered together, not with a shout. Not with a vote, but with a song. Composed by a blind woman, Sung by a one-armed shepherd, echoed by a dozen languages from a dozen lands. They called it Solara. It meant the place where memory leads. The sky accepted it, and the stars rearranged to match. Solara was born. No longer just a ranch, not a town, not a city. An idea, rooted in place. It became the center of names. People came not to settle, but to remember. To begin, to bring what the world had nearly forgotten. Stories. Of places the wind no longer traveled. Of people erased by silence. Of songs half sung, dreams half lived. Echo became something more than herself. Not a leader, a thread. Every new tale passed through her hands. Every visitor told their truth at her table. And she, in turn, wrote them into the margins of the ledger, margins that now grew on their own. One morning, Silva did not wake. She passed quietly beneath the ink tree, hands folded over runestone. Shaped like an apple seed. Echo buried her beneath the orchard. No speech. Just memory. The bark tree bloomed golden that spring. Rowan carved Silva's name into its root. The sky flickered once in thanks. Years passed. Echo grew gray. The ledger, no longer glowed constantly. It pulsed like a heartbeat. And then one summer evening, a girl arrived. Barefoot, dusty. Carrying a mirror that reflected everything but her. Echo met her at the mesa's edge. Do you know who you are? She asked. The girl shook her head. Then let's find out together. They called her Nova. And she dreamed of stars not yet born, of languages not yet spoken, of a memory so deep, even the voice had never touched it. And when she opened her mouth to sing, the ledger turned its own page. Echo lived long enough to see the mesa change again. To watch stone become song. To see the roots of the ink tree spread beneath the world. And when she finally laid down her pen, it wasn't in silence. It was in choir. The people of Solara sang her into the sky. Rowan buried her beside Silva. Nova planted a new seed. And the sky blinked. Just once. But it was enough. The ledger wrote one final sentence on its own. Here ended no one. Here began everyone. Mesa Diablo, now Solara, stood eternal. A ranch turned myth. A myth turned truth. A truth written in the stars. Let me know if you'd like to continue with part 18. A new generation is about to rise, and Nova's mirror has begun to reflect names we've never seen before. Title: A Struggling Rancher Part 18, Nova's Reflection. The Mesa had changed names, but not its soul. Solara stretched further than Mesa Diablo ever had. Its boundaries no longer defined by fence lines or trail markers, but by remembrance. What began as a sanctuary had become a movement, a beacon, a place that rewrote the world by remembering it. And Nova, barefoot, mirror in hand, was its next question. She wandered through the orchards the way Echo once had. She sat under the ink tree, which now bore silver apples that hummed in low tones. She listened to the songs of elders who claimed to remember Rowena's voice in their dreams. But Nova herself remembered nothing. No family. No language. No past. Just the mirror and the feeling that someone was missing. The mirror never showed her face. Instead, it showed stories of fragments at moments from the lives of others. A hunter building a bow of light. A child rescuing a drowned book. A girl who wept over a map of constellations, whispering names she didn't know she knew. Rowan studied the mirror by firelight. It's not a tool, he said. It's a door. To where? Nova asked. To the place your story hasn't been told yet. Nova took the mirror into the sky cavern, a natural dome beneath the mesa, filled with glimmering fossils and ancient carvings. She held it to the stone walls, and they changed. Symbols danced. Languages blinked. Stories began rewriting themselves. She's activating the archive, Rowan whispered, watching from above. She's not just remembering, she's rewiring. From the carvings, a shape emerged. A figure. Tall. Cloaked. Carrying a mirror. identical to Nova's. She's been here before, Silva's granddaughter murmured. Or will be again. That night, Nova sat beneath the ink tree and opened her mouth to speak, but her voice came in echoes. Hundreds, each saying a different name, each from a different timeline. She clutched her ears. The mirror pulsed, and she collapsed. In her dreams. Echo appeared. You're not alone, she said. Why don't I remember? Because you're remembering everyone else. Nova woke with ink on her palms. Not drawn. Earned. The people gathered. Rowan laid the ledger at her feet. You don't need to finish what we began, he said. Then what do I do? Begin what we couldn't. Nova stood. The mirror hovered beside her. She spoke a single sentence. Let there be a story with no silence. The mirror shattered. And inside it, a seed. They planted it in the center of Solar, a dot within a day. It grew into a tower of light. Within a week, it sang. Its language? All of them. Its purpose? To gather. From distant lands came the forgotten. From broken timelines came the unnamed. Nova welcomed them all. She gave them titles, pages, voices. The tower remembered everything. Years passed. Rowan faded into legend. Silva's orchard bore fruit that whispered poems. The ink tree bowed in reverence. Nova led not as a leader, but as a reflection. Let me know when you're ready for part 19. The tower has begun to hear new voices. Ones not from this world, and the next. Story is ready to arrive. Title: A Struggling Rancher Part 19. When the tower dreamed, Solara slept. Not in weariness, but in peace. The tower, known now as the Pillar of Pages, stood at the center of the mesa like a quill frozen mid-sentence. It reached beyond clouds, its roots whispering with inked memory, its songs audible only to those who had been forgotten. Nova moved quietly through the nights now, not for secrecy, for reverence. She could feel the weight of the towers listening. It didn't just remember stories, it understood them. Began asking questions. And one evening, it asked her, what happens when a story ends before it begins? That night, the tower dreamed. It pulsed blue. The air trembled. The stars above aligned into unfamiliar constellations, curved runes that spelled names no one recognized. Then came the rain. Not water. Paper. Thousands of sheets, falling from the sky, each bearing a single paragraph. Each from a story half told. Nova ran into the orchard, catching one in her hand. It read, she died at the door before learning her own name. The tower opened a door. Its base, a glyph lit up, revealing a spiral staircase of mirrored stone. Nova descended. No one followed. She walked for hours or seconds. Time became viscous. At the bottom, a room. At the center, a child, eyes closed. Hair, made of static. Heart pulsing with ink. Nova knelt beside them. Who are you? The child opened their eyes. They glitched. They spoke with thousands of voices at once. I'm the story that never lived. Nova reached for their hand. Would you like to? The tower above pulsed. A second heartbeat. The child blinked, then whispered, yes. Outside, the people of Solara watched as the Pillar of Pages split. From its side emerged a figure, Nova, and the child. Their names were not spoken, but felt like déjà vu wrapped in thunder. The child chose a name, Kiran. And Kiran began writing. Not stories. Corrections. Memories that had never been. Towns unbuilt, wars unfought, children unborn, wrote them into existence, and the world shifted. Rowan's grave returned to a living garden. Silva's laughter echoed from the orchard. Even after sunset, Rowena's first rifle-long thought, rusted and buried, appeared in the barn. Oiled and warm, Echo's footprints were seen again beneath the ink tree. Time was braided. Nova watched with awe. Are we rewriting history? Kiran shook their head. We're restoring possibility. But not everyone approved. A traveler from the east arrived dressed in formal robes, eyes closed. She called herself Historia. You are upsetting the order, she told Nova. We're restoring stories that never had the chance to matter. Some stories are better untold. Why? Because they threaten. The dominant narrative, Nova smiled. That's the point. Historia tried to seize the tower, but it did not recognize her. She spoke commands in ancient tongues. It responded with laughter. Children born of stories that had never been told stood beside Nova and Kirin. They held no weapons. Only memories. And that was enough. Histora faded. Her robes turned to dust. And the tower thanked them. Solara became a sanctuary for the might have been. For the untold. For the whispered. And Nova, gray now, sat each morning beneath the ink-tree. Kiran, still young, still writing, sat at her feet. What comes next? Kiran asked one day. Nova looked at the stars. I think the sky is about to remember. U.S. Let me know when you're ready for part 20, the grand conclusion to the saga. When the sky writes back and Solara faces its final test. To become not a memory, but a myth eternal. Title: A Struggling Rancher, Part 20, The Sky That Wrote Back. It began with a single star. Flickering, then blinking, then writing. A ribbon of light unfolded across the sky, looping and curving in radiant calligraphy. The entire mesa paused. Even the animals stilled. The sky was speaking. Not in thunder, not in storm, but in script. Nova stood beneath the ink tree, her hair silver, her spine slightly bent from years of holding stories. Kiran stood beside her, taller now, wiser in the quiet way of those who learned from everything they chose not to say. The sky wrote, "Are you ready to be remembered?" Nova placed her palm on the tree. Yes. The pillar of pages lit from root to crown. The orchards bloomed out of season. Every apple sang. The ledger, long dormant, opened on its own and turned pages that shimmered like starlight. From the sky, beams of light descended, not destructive, preserving. They swept across Solara, touching walls. Names, artifacts, faces, archiving not on paper, but in cosmic permanence. The stories of Solara were no longer bound to bark or ink or voice. They were being etched into the very fabric of the sky. Rowan's garden bloomed with luminescent ivy. Echo's grave pulsed like a heartbeat. Silva's name echoed from wind chimes that spun without wind. And Nova, holding Kiran's hand, looked up and asked, "Why now?" The sky responded, "Because even the stars forget, and we needed to remember you." Then came the silence, but it was not absence. It was reverence, a silence that hummed with power. Nova stepped forward. "Then let me offer something in return." She raised the mirror shard she'd kept from the day her first self shattered the old lens. It floated, spun, and then projected every page she'd ever written. Every face, every fallen name, every rewritten timeline, every child born of story. She held nothing back. The sky absorbed it all and wept light. A crack opened above the mesa. Not a wound, a hatch. And from it descended figures made of constellation lines, celestial archivists, born of nebula and old memory. They landed in the orchard, kneeling. "We are the astral scribes," one said. "We have not written in 10,000 cycles," Nova bowed. "Then you are welcome home." The astral scribes studied the ink tree. They sang in tones that bent space. They wrote in the wind. And they turned to Kiran. "You carry what we lost." Kiran nodded. "Because you forgot to listen. We are listening now." He raised his stylus, a tool he had carved from Echo's old branch, and began to teach them. In the decades that followed, Solara became the center not just of human story, but of cosmic reconciliation. Lost planets remembered their names. Timelines fused into harmony. Languages long extinct were sung by birds, and the stars began to pulse in rhythm with Solara's orchard bloomed. Nova aged gracefully. She spoke less, listened more. One day, She walked into the orchard and did not return. Not gone. Given. The ink tree bore blossoms in her likeness, and the sky flickered with a message. She lives in the punctuation between stars. Kieran, now grown, became the first story warden. He wore no crown, just a sash of bookmarks. He built towers of language, rivers of metaphor, and sanctuaries where even the most fragile story could be nurtured into truth. Solara thrived. And across the universe, whenever someone closed their eyes and whispered, "Tell me a story," a seed from the mesa took root. The final page of the ledger, blank for centuries, inked itself. The ranch endured, the stories survived. The sky remembered. And from that remembering, everything else was born. Beneath the ink tree, now grown into a forest, children gathered. They tell tales of the struggling rancher, of the widow who saved a mesa, of the girl who remembered, of the boy who rewrote. Of the sky that wrote back. And when they finish, the stars blink. Not in closure. In invitation. Because every ending here is just the echo of a beginning, and some stories never stop growing. The end.